I've been living with this 2022 Hyundai NEXO hydrogen fuel cell powered EV for the last week. We're gonna go for a drive and talk about some of the things I like and dislike about this very quirky little SUV. Really pleasant startup chime there. When you start this car, it's essentially dead silent, just like any traditional EV. But once we start driving it, that's where we'll notice some of the differences between this hydrogen-powered EV versus a traditional battery-powered EV. So this is the limited trim, which is the top trim for the NEXO. With freight and handling, this car costs around $64,000 US. There's also the blue base model. The blue model is rated for 380 miles, whereas this limited is rated for 354 miles. But the limited trim does get you quite a few options, including rain sensing wipers, a hands-free liftgate, a wider sunroof, ventilated seats, heated steering wheel, blind spot monitoring, a 360-degree camera, remote parking assist, as well as an upgraded 440-watt 8-speaker Krell audio system. It also comes with upsized wheels and tires. The limited trim weighs just over 4,000 pounds, and that explains why it gets a little bit less range than the base model. So let's talk about some of the things I like about the Hyundai NEXO. First of all, the interior layout and ergonomics of this car are really nice. This car actually came out for the 2019 model year, which predates the very popular Hyundai Ioniq 5 EV. Having spent a week with the Ioniq 5, now I know where that interior got its inspiration. This is a very similar look and feel with an excellent digital dash as well as this huge center infotainment screen. There are tons of very large and well labeled buttons on this center console here. Everything falls to hand so easily. A heated steering wheel that actually heats the entire outer rim rather than just the 9-3 grips like some other cars. Despite this car's rather high asking price of $64,000, I think this interior actually feels up to par for that price range. It's not exactly going to blow you away if you're comparing it to luxury cars, but considering you are obviously paying a premium for this EV, especially considering it's a hydrogen-powered EV, the overall fit and finish is more than acceptable in my opinion. I love this two-spoke steering wheel. It gives it a very modern feel. There are a few things that could be better, like this large piece of silver plastic across the dash. It looks like metal, but when you touch it, that's clearly plastic. And that brings me to the second thing I really like about this NEXO. This is a supremely comfortable and easy to drive vehicle. The exterior dimensions are very, very close to the Ioniq 5, and so is the ride comfort and NVH levels. There's a lightness to the controls of this car, the steering, the throttle, the brakes, that enable you to drive this car for extended periods of time without feeling fatigued. Ride comfort and suspension compliance are excellent. It really just floats you along the road and soaks up any bumps and imperfections. But there is one unique and interesting sound that you'll hear when driving this, which is different than other EVs, and that is what I describe as a high-pitched, almost whistle, which I can only assume is related to those hydrogen fuel cells. It's faint and I would say unobtrusive, but very clearly audible from inside the car. This car is packed full of tech, and that includes this fuel cell electric vehicle screen on the infotainment display here that'll show you things like range, energy flow, an eco driving mode that helps you track your fuel economy and eco contribution, as well as this unique display here that lets you see your hydrogen tank pressure, temperatures, and tank status. And that brings me to the final thing that I really like about the NEXO, which is the fact that when you compare this to traditional EVs, this offers a good amount more range. Even in top limited trim, which reduces your range by around 26 miles, 354 miles is quite a bit more range than you'd get in something like an Ioniq 5, a Kia EV6, a Ford Mustang Mach-E, or even the Tesla Model Y dual motor. I've been driving this car for a week and I've only consumed about a quarter of its fuel. And compared to traditional EVs, this thing is a lot quicker to charge. It takes about 5 minutes to charge fully, whereas normal EVs can take anywhere from 30 minutes if you have a high-speed charger to upwards of 9 or 10 hours if you're just charging at home. So those are some of the things I really like about the NEXO, but there's quite a list of things I don't like as well. And the first one is the performance. This car is front wheel drive only. You can only get it with an electric motor that powers the front axle. And that motor produces 161 horsepower and 291 pound-feet of torque. And when you're just driving around town or in stop-and-go traffic, the instant delivery of that torque makes this car feel pretty peppy and maneuverable. Whenever I put my foot down, I get instant response and a good surge of torque. The problem is that torque tapers off very quickly. At freeway speeds, say at 60 miles an hour and above, passing other cars can be a little bit frustrating. You have to be patient. Whereas other EVs like the Mach-E, the Tesla Model Y and Model 3, the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, for around the same price or often even cheaper, those EVs will give you about double the horsepower. Plenty of torque down low, but that power just dies off so quickly. This car's performance is still adequate for everyday commuting, but you will likely have to adjust your driving style to make up for that lack of power. 161 horsepower in a 4,000 pound car is underpowered. And there's the fact that it is front wheel drive only. If you do drive frequently in poor weather conditions or low grip surfaces, all-wheel drive does offer an obvious advantage. And those other EVs I mentioned can be optioned with all-wheel drive. Now, the next thing I don't like about this NEXO is a pretty crucial one, and that's the fact that hydrogen fueling stations just aren't that prevalent. Here in the Bay Area, California, there are a decent number of stations, but even for me, the closest station is about 6 miles away. And while I haven't had to refuel this car yet, I wasn't very reassured when I browsed through some of the reviews of that particular station. A lot of people were complaining that half the time the station's not even operational. And if you live outside of California, good luck. And that brings me to the final thing I don't like about the Hyundai NEXO, and that is the simple fact that Hyundai also has the Ioniq 5. While this car costs $64,000 as spec, you can get a fully loaded Ioniq 5 like the one I tested a few months ago for $57,000. So what does that $7,000 premium get you other than a bit more range? Well, the answer is not a whole lot. For example, this car is missing a heads-up display, which the Ioniq 5 has. This car seems to have the same suite of driving aids, but again, it doesn't offer an advantage over the Ioniq 5. It's roughly the same size, there's not any more usability, and in my opinion, the exterior design is a far cry from the futuristic yet slightly retro look of that Ioniq 5, which I absolutely adore. The exterior of the NEXO looks a lot more generic in my opinion, and without the giant labeling on the sides of the car, I would have assumed this was just some run-of-the-mill crossover. So in conclusion, the Hyundai NEXO is not for everyone. While I'm a big fan of its interior, ergonomics, comfort, usability, and driving range, hydrogen fueling infrastructure is still very limited and makes this car a tough sell. Furthermore, there are other cheaper options, even from Hyundai themselves, that I find are much more compelling options. And while you can argue that hydrogen-powered EVs offer a whole new level of eco-friendliness, from a purely practical standpoint, I'm not yet sold. If they can figure out how to scale the infrastructure and make this type of vehicle a lot more accessible to a lot more people, then I am totally on board. I'm sure Hyundai and other manufacturers are more than aware of this, and they're certainly not expecting these cars to be top sellers. But I do appreciate that cars like this are being made and that this technology is being explored. And I do think it's admirable that Hyundai will actually give you $15,000 or 3 years, whichever comes first, of free fuel. So with that said, a big thank you to Hyundai for letting me test out the NEXO for the past week. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this type of vehicle. Is there a promising future for hydrogen-powered EVs? Or do you think traditional battery-powered EVs are going to be our inevitable future? Thank you all for watching, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.